I am thrilled to present Bethany Baptiste. She's a born and raised Jacksonvillian, as we heard from her Duval chant. She is a preschool inclusion specialist by day and a young adult SFF novelist by night. And if she's not writing an inclusion support plan or a story, she does retail therapy at Florida bookstores. And she takes scheduled naps with her 2 chaotic evil dogs. We support that. And you can visit her at bethanybaptiste.com. Bethany will be joined in conversation with local poet and artist Fatih Ashley. Fatih is a Ghanaian-American literary and visual artist who resides here in Florida, and she holds a Master's of Arts in English from the University of North Florida. Her poem Cape Coast was performed in Echoes of Us, a series of curated monologues directed by Tony Award nominee Michelle Shea in 2022. She's also editor-in-chief for the Banyan Review, a 2023 Best of the Net nominee, and a 2023 Fellow of the Craft Institute, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to curating culturally inclusive ecosystems throughout the world of arts and entertainment. She also consults and facilitates workshops for Authors Roundtable at North Florida, and she teaches creative writing at Jacksonville Arts and Music School. So, Fatih, I leave the rest to you.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. Can our folks in Zoomlandia hear us? Hello to you out there in the world and to our live audience members. I am overjoyed, really, to do one of my favorite things, which is to talk literature and then to have the person who created it to talk about it with. That is definitely a treat for me. And so thank you, Bethany, for taking the time to do this with us.
It is such an honor. Before we started, I was just telling Fatih that I actually grew up right around the corner from here on Long Branch Boulevard, and I used to come here as a kid in the 90s. Yeah, the 1900s or the
as the kids say it, 1900s.
So yeah, it's a very circular moment,
which is beautiful. And now we're talking about ultimately your debut novel. So to think it can't happen, it does.
It can.
It definitely does. So I have tons of questions, but let's just dive in if we may. So from my reading, I understand the poisons we drink are a combination of your dream world, of this pink-haired witch, and then real life experience. Can you tell us how you took those two things and the poisons we drink was born?
Yeah, so it started in June 2017. I was feeling very upset, and so I put in Practical Magic, the movie, and I sat down to watch it and fell asleep, as I always do. And I had a dream of a pink-haired girl doing something very, very awful. And so when I woke up, I was very fascinated by this character, and I knew that I had to write her. In Practical Magic, for those of you that don't know, there is a love potion aspect in Practical Magic that causes a lot of chaos and drama, and it is a catalyst for the story. And so I was so fascinated by the idea that a love potion could cause so much drama and messiness that I knew that this pink-haired girl that I had a dream about was going to brew love potions. The issue was I didn't want to have her brew romantic love potions. I thought that was really boring. So I had to come up with other types of love potions for her to brew. And so for the life of me, I couldn't figure out what I wanted. And so then I did research, and of course the Greeks, being as smart as they are, they came up with the names for the different types of love thousands of years ago. And so I realized, like, oh yeah, familial love and self-love and friendship love. And so I picked 7 types of love that the Greeks had named, but 8's my favorite number, so I picked one more. I had to find one more. And with the other love potions, you're either falling in love with someone, whether it's romantically or platonically, or you're falling in love with yourself. And so I knew that the 8th potion had to be different. And so after some thought, I realized that I wanted her to brew a love potion where someone could fall in love with an idea. So once that was stuck in my mind that she was going to brew love potions where someone could fall in love with an idea, I had to figure out where I was going to set the story. I originally wanted to set it in Florida. But I realized that I wasn't going to get the most bang for my buck if I set it in Florida. I don't like going too far north. But after much thought, I realized that Washington, D.C. would be the best place to set the story, because in Washington, D.C., a idea is a powerful thing. It can turn into a bill. That bill can turn into a law. It's what helps people get elected. In Washington, D.C. stands for ideas and philosophies and ideals. And so I knew that it was going to be set there.
With DC, and you're talking about legislation, how these ideas become laws, and we know laws affect our everyday life. I was curious in how you were able to, because it's so well done. These would seem to be big ideas for younger readers, the politics of it all. So you take these big ideas, so to speak, and you put it in this form that is so easily digestible. It's resplendent with colloquialisms and culture, and then there's so much humor. Like you do that as well. Was it intentional to weave the humor in, or did it just naturally come out in the writing?
Yeah, it naturally came out in the writing once I realized that I was going to write a story where a Black family was going to be central to it. And so I wanted to focus on the joy and the humor of what it means to be in a Black family, along with the drama and the dark side of what it means when you are in a family that keeps secrets from you. And those secrets can impact you, even if you weren't alive yet.
Yeah. And secrets, I would say, is one of your major themes, along with love and all of the names for it and how it manifests. But secrecy and the power of secrecy, and I want to be careful using the word power, because in the book you make a distinction between power and magic. Could you perhaps read that? I think it's at the beginning.
Sure.
Where you make that
Absolutely.
distinction.
So in chapter 0, there is a opening quote, and it goes as such: "An internal gift exists within all breathing things to recognize where one stands in the food chain. Witchers are what humans could have been, but according to scientists, a missing link in the evolutionary chain sent the two species in opposite directions. However, magic doesn't make witchers superior to humans. For what humans lack in magic, they make up for it with something even more dangerous: power."
Even the way you end it, there's a mystery in there. Power, what does that power look like? What does it look like? How does it manifest? Without spoiling, can you share some of what magic we might see in the book relative to callings? We'll get there. And then what power also looks like in the book, how you counterpoint those.
Yeah, so when I was trying to figure out how I wanted to build the world in The Poisons We Drink, I knew that the Witchers were going to be oppressed by the humans. And so the magic comes in all different types of forms, right? So there's the typical ones where they are spell casting. They're brewing potions. They can levitate things. They can set things on fire. Just those common powers that you would find in any witchy type book. But in regards to power, the reason why I wanted to make a distinction is because, so in the book, how humans are able to rule over the Witchers is through politics, and police and money. And so it's like a tug of war between the two, because you would think that magic would rule over power, but you could be magical and be broke.
Mm.
You could be magical and you could be broke, and you could have someone that's not magical and they have money and they have power and they can do all the things your magic couldn't even dream of. So I wanted to make that distinction to show that even if you have magic in your veins, you might have to use your magic to obtain power. And so that's the central journey in this book. The characters that have magic in their veins, they have to weaponize their magic in order to acquire the power.
And I can't help but think about, we've heard this black girl magic, right? And so your main character is a black teenager, a young woman. But it's beyond the trite use of black girl magic. She's genuinely magical in the book, but she's a complex character in that she's taking on a lot of responsibilities, and some of it isn't her choice. Most of it isn't her choice. And so you have adultification that's going on, parentification that's happening in the work, and somehow you balance that and allow her to make the choices that an 18-year-old young lady would make. Was it challenging to create that balance?
It was, because Black children are often adultified, and whether it's in the real world or even in the publishing industry. And so you have to advocate for fictional characters to make sure that you are being authentic to the audience that you're writing the book for. So it was extremely hard, because I really there's this expectation that Black characters in books have to be nice, kind, perfect, and that's how people can relate to them. And so I really wanted to create a character that is extremely, extremely flawed. And I also wanted to lean into the fact that even though she's 18 years old, she's still a child. She's still a child, so she's going to make reckless decisions, spur of the moment decisions, and then there's going to be consequences to that. She's going to be irrational. She's going to be angry. But I wanted to tap into that, because whether it's in real life or it's in a book, it's difficult for Black people, fiction or real, to be able to express ourselves. We are told that our anger or expressing our emotions or the thoughts that we feel, it's not warranted, it's not justified. Be quiet, hold it in. And so this story puts you in the mind of a very cynical 18-year-old girl that is existing in a world that does not want her, and so she's going to act accordingly. And, one of the main things that I knew early on when I started writing the book, I did not want my characters to be loved. I wanted them to be understood. You don't have to love them to understand the choices that they make. And I think that's very, very important, that we have more Black characters that do things that you might not agree with, but you understand why they did what they did.
Understanding, again, I think is a theme. And some of the I would say the groups that are in opposition, that's one of the main things that they're missing, and how you decide to allow that to play out, for me, is evocative, and the parallels that are used to speak to what injustice might look like in this world that you create in DC. And the main character, her name is Venus. So there are a lot of little details that you put in there that just elevate the story and create deeper meaning. So if we could talk about the supporting cast, and also like their names, for example, Janice, who is the sister of Venus. Is it okay to say what her power is, or
Yeah.
should I keep it a secret?
So, Janus is named after the Roman god of doorways because her power is the ability gives her the ability to open up portals and doorways. So in this world, there are two different sets of magic that witchers have. They have a birthright, which has powers that are common to any witch, like levitation and telekinesis and telepathy, and then there is a calling, and a calling is something that is very specific to them. And so each witcher in the book has a calling. So, but behind each calling, there's a reason why I chose that calling, and I based it off of I based it off of things that we deal with in the Black community. So for Janice, as I said, she opens up portals and doorways. And the reason why I wanted her to open up portals and doorways is because Black folk, Black kids, we open up doors for ourselves that are otherwise closed. We make new doorways for ourselves. And so we can get into places where we are not wanted. Her cousin, Terrell, has the ability to shapeshift, and the reason why I picked shape-shifting for him is because it's supposed to represent code switching. It's supposed to represent code switching throughout the story. He has a lot of difficulty changing into things that he's not because he wants to be himself, and so that is his conflict through the story. We have a character named Bram. His ability is he I love Bram too. He's a mess. His ability is superhuman strength, and so the reason why I picked that is because oftentimes Black men are viewed as a threat just by people simply looking at them and judging them. And so I picked superhuman strength because he is one of the sweetest and kindest characters in the book. But he's judged immediately from page 1, and then you see a reversal of that in the very next chapter. And so those are the types of callings that I had for the characters and the inspiration behind them.
The language that you use to differentiate, those characteristics or abilities, I also thought was just not only well thought out, but it added a spiritual note to it as well. When someone has a calling and they come to this calling at a particular point in their life, they're not aware of it immediately. So it takes some age, some growth, and then, here's your calling, and you're not fantastic at it immediately.
No.
It's something you have to labor with, work with, and I found that to be a beautiful touch. And with those characters that you named, the ensemble writing that you have done with it, I literally found myself laughing out loud because of the way that they respond to each other and the interplay, and really the exposition in it moves a lot like a treatment for a film or a series from the first page, and it's almost like you casted them. You had them do chem tests, and you decided, okay, this person has to play Bram, this person had to play Venus, and it's a family ensemble for the most part. And so to me, choosing family, there has to be a reason behind that, and showing the dynamics of this family. Can you share that with us, why it had to be a family versus just friends?
Yeah, in fantasy, and even in Disney movies, like the whole family get wiped out. And so then you have a character that has to move through the world by themselves. And then sometimes they find friends and other people along the way that become their found family. But I really wanted to focus on flesh and blood family, because Black family units are so tight knit, and I was blessed to have that growing up. And so I wanted a story where the character is put in a situation where she feels like she has to face it alone, but she has a strong support system behind her. She has an aunt, she has an uncle, she has cousins, she has a sister. And so they help her every step of the way. And they become her reason to give a damn about the world, in a world that doesn't want her. And so she's willing to do anything for her flesh and blood, even if it means spilling flesh and blood.
And everything comes with a cost. There are no free lunches in the poisons we drink. Magic sounds cool until, you detail out that anything that's done, there's something else that comes with it. And I love how that echoes. And I read this and I think about my students, and their age range and how they make choices. And they think, well, it's only for now. I just have now. But the choices you make, there's a ripple effect. It costs something. It costs somebody something. And the way that you decided to illustrate that in terms of having these callings and how you choose to use them, and no one can have it all. That's the other thing too. In here, no one can just do and have everything. That cost is there. And so that kind of leads me to inspiration. We talked about how you brought the things together, your personal experience and the dream, but the inspiration to make the story what it actually is, the essence of it. Can you share?
Yeah, so it started a few months earlier in 2016. Election night, I went to sleep, Hillary was winning. And when I woke up, Trump won, and I was like, what's happening? It was like a shock to my system. And so I kind of put that in the back of my mind as I moved through the next few months. And so once I decided that The Poisons We Drink was going to be in Washington, D.C., I used how I felt about the results of the 2016 elections as the basis for The Poisons We Drink, because I thought to myself, if this Black girl is going to brew love potions where people could fall in love with an idea, and she lives in Washington, D.C., and Washington, D.C. is a predominantly Black city, and I didn't even know that until I did my research. I didn't know that Washington, D.C. was a predominantly Black city. I didn't know that they had a nickname called Chocolate City. Had no idea. And so I was fascinated by the idea that there is the Washington, D.C. that we see, with the pristine monuments and the statues and the museums and the White House and Capitol Hill. And then there's the other side that hides in the shadow of that, like, picturesque Washington, D.C. And that's the actual heart of Washington, D.C. are those Black citizens that a lot of people do not know about. And so once I settled on that, and I did research about this odd relationship that between the Black people that live in Washington, D.C., and then people that are coming into the city to make laws and turn and such. I realized that, what if I have a Black girl that's brewing love potions where people could fall in love with an idea? What if she had to brew love potions where politicians fell in love with the idea not to pass a hateful bill? And so that really stuck out to me, and that became the basis and the core of The Poisons We Drink.
Even the way that you just described the basis, because you talk about potions in the book and how they're built. So is that your base? Your
yes, there are a lot of there are 3 different types of potions, and so it depends on how many notes that are in a potion. So you have your singular note potion, that is your weakest potion. You have your binary note potion, and then you have, which is a lot stronger, and then you have your trinary note potion, which is the deadliest of them all. And in this book, the potions throw hands. They're not just the potions that, you throw a few things in the cauldron and then boop, that's it. No, they leap out the pot. They'll snatch you up. And so it was a lot of fun creating those scenes where my character is trying to brew a potion and the potion is literally trying to just break her bones or squeeze her and then throw her away like a rag doll. So the potions are kind of like Pokemon to me. They're kind of like Pokemon, but like more vicious Pokemon, I guess.
Yeah, because I've read it.
Yeah.
They're more vicious Pokemon for sure. And I can tell in the pacing of those scenes where she's brewing and, you know, the potions are alive, how entrenched you are and dedicated to showing the cost again, and how you enjoy writing it. What's another scene, maybe two, so perhaps this is a binary question, you know, that you see what I did there, that you enjoyed, right, that stands out in your mind without spoiling for them?
Yeah, so I am a Southern Baptist through and through. And so growing up, there was always this big emphasis on like baptisms, right? Like you get into the little kiddie pool and you put on your little shower cap and they dip you back, pick you up, and then boop, you know, you're saved. And so in the book, there is something called purification, and it's where witches have to get in a tub and they have to sweat out the impurities of the world. And they use water and they use flowers to sweat out the impurities of the world, and then the impurities just kind of like spiral down the drain. And I like those kinds of scenes because it's very symbolic, and like when people, if you're Southern, you would read and be like, oh, okay, I see what she's trying to do. And so I like scenes like that. I also like scenes where the entire cast is doing something, not just Venus and one other character, but when there are more characters on a page. That's a lot of fun to write.
It comes through in powerful female or feminine presenting characters are throughout, down to the top of the food chain, even to someone like Venus and her family line and lineage is another thing that is important in passing down. So although there's secrecy, there are the books, the sacred books that have the histories of how you do something. And I thought that was an incredible detail, given so much or a lot of African American families may not have that one Bible that has who beget who,
family Bible,
and
yes,
the details and those stories. And so little things like that you slip in under this guise of fantasy and a world of magic, but it really elevates the importance of being able to document those things that are inherent to who we are, who our people are, and what we come from. Was that a conscious decision with the
It was.
spouse?
It was, because family was so important. I wanted the grimoires, I wanted the journals, I wanted the pictures, I wanted the albums, I wanted every aspect of the Witcher community to feel like each piece was an heirloom that was being passed down from generation to generation, even if it was just verbal, oral. Mm-hmm. I wanted everything to feel like an heirloom. And sometimes the heirlooms, they are innocent, and then other heirlooms are very, very sharp.
Indeed. And you know what? You said that, and that makes me think about this quote that you have here. Listen, I don't have my copy either, but I am delighted to have these several pages to pour through. Let's see. Yes. So you have a knack for these. They could be one-liners in and of themselves, but you know, you slide them in there. And so this one, for me, it says, scars had memories, and some memories had sharp edges. and the language that you're choosing there to talk about, memories, they usually exist on a spectrum, but to give it that tactile quality and then the sharpness of it, was there a particular motivation for that? What brought about such a succinct description of that side of memories that don't feel so great?
When I sometimes write one-liners or quotes like that, I do think about what is a way that I could convey it that makes it relatable to a reader, no matter how young or old they are. And so when you think about scars and you think about, well, what created the scar, something had to have created the scar. And so it just made the most sense that if there is a scar and there's a memory behind that scar, then that memory would be sharp enough to make that scar. And there's other lines like that. But I like comparing things to things that people that know commonly, because everybody has sharp memories. And there are scars that we don't want, but we bear them.
For sure. So accessible imagery, and figurative language. The other thing I enjoy just quite so much is the contemporary and also the not so contemporary phrasing and slang that's used in the book. For example, something that's not so contemporary, grown folks business, that's said in this. It's like canon, but then you have very modern slang as well. I won't give any of it away. You just have to read it. But I think that is someone, when I'm teaching and I mention the 1980s, my students are like, "That's a long time ago. How old are you?" So, but grown folks business predates that, and to tell them that's old, baby. That's not new. So to think that even when they read it, they get it, they know, oh, this is a boundary, and a lot of the colloquialisms and idioms that are laced within the text, it's showing where boundaries are, and all of the characters know what those boundaries are. There's not an explanation for them, and it's the verisimilitude of that. It makes me want to keep reading. I know these people. You read it, you will know the people for sure. And then my students could also pick this up and wouldn't lose a beat. So there is a through line, something that's very hard to do. I think you did it, where my students can pick it up, read it, and enjoy it. I could pick it up, read this, and enjoy it. And I also think my mother would pick it up and read it and enjoy it. She would talk to it the entire time because it's written like those movies. Why did you do? Yeah. Oh, it's going. You have to react as you read it, because, as I said, it does move with the pacing, quite like a series or, a film. I watch it. So
thank you. I wish it was a film. That would be
saying,
lovely.
A limited series and just speaking things out there.
That would be fun. That would be fun, like Showtime.
Why not? I mean, you got the magic going on anyway, But I am also interested in just overall what you found the most challenging about. Beautiful writing. The prose is there. Again, it moves lovely. But what was the challenge? Because you make it look easy.
It wasn't. So the most challenging part was actually not even the book itself. It was getting the book published.
Say more.
That was how much time you got. So the most difficult part was getting the book published. There are a lot of things in the book that are controversial, and I knew that there were certain scenes that would get me in trouble. And so once I finished the book and it came time to look for a literary agent to represent the book, a literary agent is someone that tries to convince publishers to buy your book. So it was difficult. It was when I first went querying with this book, it was very difficult because I knew the part in the story where people would stop immediately. And so publishing is a predominantly white industry. So if you write a authentically black book that doesn't shy away from black things, you're going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. And so in 2019, the latter half of 2019, it was very, very hard to get this book, help me get it agented. And so then 2020, I put it away, and then 2020 happened, and we already know what happened in 2020. We know about COVID, and we know about the Black Lives Matter protests and all of the things that were in the book that made agents be like, no. In 2020, suddenly it was all okay. And so it took public opinion to sway in that direction in order for traditional publishing to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I can see myself agenting this book. And so that's how I got the book agented. I wrote this book in response to the 2016 elections. And so in 2020, a week before the presidential election, it went out on submission. And I had hoped that, like, okay, if anyone reads this, they'll see what I'm trying to do and why this book is important. And they didn't see. they didn't see. We sent it out to 25 editors, and we got a lot of ghosts where people ghosted us. We got a lot of rejections. And when we got down to the 25th editor, 2 days after the deadline, that was the only yes we got. And so, and they bought the book, and it was just a very difficult process. And being in traditional publishing, it's almost like, it's like a game. It's like a game, except you don't know the rules because the space wasn't built for you. So when you are let into a room, you have to figure out the rules because no one's going to tell you. And so it was very difficult to get this book to where it is now.
But it's here.
It is here.
I love that. Yeah, the travail of it, and prevailing despite those circumstances. So tell me this then, for aspiring writers that, they hear what you're saying as, this is a lived experience. How do you continue to move through the process when, like you said, it was hard to get an agent, and then challenging to actually then for them to shop it? How do you keep going?
Yeah, so I feel like the key is you have to make a decision of what is most important to you. For me, it would have been easier to sell the book if I had cut out the things that made people uncomfortable.
But
and I realized that
would it still be the book?
Exactly. And so I made the decision early on that I was going to keep the book as true as possible to my authenticity. And I wasn't going to cut things out to make people feel comfortable, especially when they weren't the audience of the book. And so, because at the end of the day, once the book ends up on the shelves, you have to answer to your audience. And there are people that are going to be in between you that you have to go through to get to your audience. And so you have to stay true to yourself, as cliche as that sounds. You have to stay true to yourself and advocate for yourself, because there will be a lot of people that will try to change parts of your book, tell you to take things out, tell you to change things. And the book might end up being something, it might end up on the shelf, but it might end up on the shelf as something you are not proud of. And so at the end of the day, you have to decide what is most important to you and what you're willing to do to get the book, on the shelves and to the readers.
She's back.
I am back. I always return. So we are gonna take this time now to open it up to our audience questions. So if anyone has a question at this point, please do write it down on your note cards right there. And for our Zoom audience, if you have a question, do submit it through the Q&A chat, and we will get it up here. We did have some early birds, so I do have some questions. But if you come up with a question now, we do have a volunteer who will be going around and getting them, and I will hand them off to Fati.
Glad I didn't ask that. Just some pre-sorting, folks. Mm-hmm. Okay. The way the book is set up, there are epigraphs throughout. So these little introductory pieces, and a very just wizardry, I tell you. There's something called Witcherpedia that you will find in some of the entries. Yeah, Witcherpedia. Good. Right, it's perfect. So the question was, how did you decide to start each chapter with Witcherpedia entries, or at least the ones that you do start that way?
Yeah, so the book was actually sold as a 2-book series. So it was going to be over 2 books, but several months after the book was sold, I received an edit letter telling me to change it into a standalone. And so that was tough. It was tough taking 200,000 words worth of world building and story and characters and then trying to condense it into one book. And I had a very rough time trying to cut things out, squeeze things, remove characters, squeeze characters together. It was like Frankensteining all the pieces together. And so during like the second or third rewrite, I kept getting feedback saying, this is too much. It's too, you're info dumping too much. You're info dumping too much. You're losing us. And so out of frustration, I was just like, you know what if I just made a little website called Witcherpedia and just put it at the top of each chapter so that the reader had the context that they needed to read the chapter. And at first I thought my editor was going to be like, that's really stupid. But they liked the idea. And so there were only a few chapters that had Witcherpedia entries, and then I decided, well, what if I add quotes? And what if I add excerpts? And what if I add audio excerpts? And what if I add proverbs? And what if I add this? Or what if I add like the excerpt of a recipe that Venus might use? And so then every chapter ended up having a piece of world building that I didn't want to take out the story completely, and it just fit better to start a chapter with.
And that makes perfect sense, because if you go from 2 to 1, you don't want to overload the prose with too much exposition. You need the characters to be doing something, and those opening entries just add so much texture to it. And Witcherpedia, I giggled immediately and just thought, she's brilliant. Okay,
Thank you.
so the next one is. That's not the one I wanted. It was this one. How did you go about crafting your world? Was there a way you kept track of how the world works?
Yeah, so there are all types of writers in the world. There are pantsers. Pantsers are someone that writes by the seat of their pants. That means they do not. We know a little bit about the story and then we just go for it. We might not know the ending. We might know a few scenes and we just try to piece together the story in between the scenes that we thought about. And then there are plotters. Plotters are the people that plan everything out from A to B and they write along that track, right? Yeah. And so I'm a pantser. So because I don't know a lot about the story, I might know the concept of the story or what I would like to do, or I prefer to put all of my energy into the world building, because if I build out the world, even though I might not know how my characters might get from point A to point B, I can just pick a point and they'll find a story along the way. Yeah. And so what I did was I kept track through a world building Bible. I included all types of tidbits of information that I needed. I even created a glossary for myself of the types of terms that I would use, and every time I came up with something, I would put it in the glossary. Every time I came up with the magic system, I would put it on the rules for the magic system page. Every time I came up with something for the world building, I would put it on its designated page, so I had something to refer to as I was world building, because I didn't know where the story was gonna go. I really didn't know where the story was gonna go. Some of the best plot twists that people have told me are in the book. Those were the plot twists where that just came out of nowhere in my brain. I did not even plan for it. So if they were surprised, I was surprised when I came up with it too.
Those pants. Okay. So you had a system, you organized it, and you had a reference that you could refer to keep with the coherence of what you were doing. Yeah? Okay. So even though you were a pantser, there was some organization. Pantsers get a bad rap. That there's, because they're not outliners. Outliners, they write out, okay, this will happen, then that will happen. They do it through and through. So you are on the opposite end of the spectrum of that. But there's organization. Yes,
but I don't know how to organize myself when it comes to taxes. So I wish I had that ability.
At this time of year, I think most people do. So let's see. When you started the writing process, did you start off with themes you wanted to address first, or did they come naturally from the world you built?
It started out with themes I wanted to address first. Once I decided that she was going to be a character that brewed love potions, I really, really loved the idea of the gray morality of, if you brew a love potion that is meant for someone to give someone else, where is your culpability in that? And I was so fascinated by that idea that I kind of wanted to explore how Venus felt about that. Brewing something that is going to be given to someone else, where you're taking someone's will away, like where would she stand in that? Sure. And so, and then that's when I settled on, you know what, it would make writing the story would not make sense if I actually had Venus feel guilty about brewing love potions. It would be more interesting if I made her a morally gray character. And then I settled on the idea, if she's going to be a morally gray character, then everyone is going to be a morally gray character, because even though practical magic is probably the heart of the story, at the time, as I was creating the magic system for the poisons we drink, the brewing system specifically, I was watching Breaking Bad and I was obsessed with it. Okay. Well, so the magic system is based on like the Breaking Bad system, and so because Breaking Bad has a lot of morally gray characters and bad characters, it just kind of helped made the process a lot better.
Got you. Okay. So because we're not too far away from that original question, I want to ask you this, on behalf of someone else. Did you have to get permission for the epigraphs that were not your original content? And they asked, who is your publisher? But if I'm not mistaken, aren't all your epigraphs from your brain children?
Yeah, which all of the epigraphs are my brain children. The only thing that there is a quote at the beginning of the book that it was, so the quote is, let me find it. It says, resentment is like drinking a poison, then hoping it will kill your enemies. And it's commonly attributed to Nelson Mandela and others. Because we didn't know where the origin of that quote was, and we just attributed it to Nelson Mandela and others, I didn't need permission for that. So yeah, but all of the other epigraphs, they came out of my brain. They might have been inspired by other things and I tailored it to fit my world, but they came out of my brain.
Gotcha. Okay. So more about what's coming out of your brain. You talked about keeping the book true to you. What changes were you not willing to make? Were there any changes you did make or advice that helped you shape the final draft?
Yeah, so there were things that I had to put my foot down on. And it had to do with the blackness in the book. When you have at every stage of the publishing process, you really don't come across a lot of people that share the same identity as you. It's very predominantly white. And so if your editor is white and your copy editor is white and your proofreader is white and your marketing team is white and everyone is white, they're going to ask you to explain things in the story that your audience would naturally know. And so I would push back on that, because if I explained what it meant, then it's no longer for my audience. And so that was very important to me that I pushed back on, because I felt like y'all have Google at your fingertips. If you don't know what I'm saying, you can Google it. We've had things like Ask Jeeves and all that stuff like that for all these years. If you don't know what someone is saying, you can absolutely do the research.
Do the research. Okay. Did the writing process feel different from an existing world or character? And so they're referencing Izzy Hawthorne.
Yeah, what was the question?
Was the writing process different from that?
Yes, it was very, very different, because with Izzy Hawthorne, she was not my character. It was not my world. When Disney reached out to me to ask me to audition for the process, they were still in the early stages of creating Lightyear. And so because of that, they gave me a script. I read it, loved it. They let me go to a screener, and the screener was just like pictures with like Chris Evans and a few other actors voicing it, and they had like some rough draft, like 3D, and it was so engrossing. I thought that it would be like very distracting to just see like picture board type stuff, but it was so engrossing that it was just a very cool process. And like Disney is just so secretive. It was a very intense process. But then they gave me like an art packet. And the art packet was like, this is what the world is going to look like. These are what we think the characters are going to look like. This is what the weapons are going to look like. This is what, the spaceships are going to look like. And so these are what the characters are going to look like. And so I took the script that they gave me, and I took this art packet that they gave me. And then I remembered the screener, and then I had to write the story from the point of view of this character of a movie that was not complete. And so I had 1 month to write it. And I had 1 month to revise it. And so it was a fun process trying to figure things out. But if you're writing if you're an author and you're writing in a world that Disney is still trying to figure out, we're asking each other questions and we looking at each other crazy, because it would be very basic things that they still did not have the answer to. So I would have to come up with a solution, and then they would decide like, yeah, no, you're hot, you're warm. And so it was very difficult to write Izzy Hawthorne that first draft that June, because they changed the script like 6 times, and they kept moving around scenes. So a scene that would be in Act 3 would end up in Act 1, and then I would have to rewrite the entire story. And then, the next week, I would, after I've rewritten the entire story, I'm getting close to the end, then they would give me another script that would change an entire act. And so then I would have to go back and rewrite the story again. And like Disney was getting on my nerves. It was Disney was getting on my nerve, because I was like, it was so, and sometimes they would add characters, they would add completely new scenes, and it was an interesting process. And it was also nice to be able to brainstorm with the studio, because if I asked a question, or if I asked like, could I do this, the studio would get back to me a week later and be like, sure, or not. And then you would have, because it is Disney, they would have like a checker, and so the checker would like read your story and then make notes like, we've changed that, it's in a different script, it's in script blah 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 XYZ, and they're like, I don't have that script, so where is that script? So it was it was a very fascinating process with Disney, and it actually helped me learn a lot of different things about myself, because I didn't think that I would be able to write a book that quickly. And I wouldn't mind working with Disney again. But yeah, the process was very, very different, because the characters, the world, it was not mine. As opposed to this story where I had to build everything from scratch, from the ground up.
Interpreting a world given to you versus the one that you're actively creating. Okay. Next question. Even though magic comes with a cost, is there a calling one of your characters has that you would want to have?
Oh yeah. I would absolutely do Janice. Her ability to open doorways. Gas is not cheap, y'all. And I would definitely just want to open up a doorway so I can go to Rose's down the street, or open up a doorway and end in a country that I want to, and not have to go through TSA and customs and such. So I would definitely pick doorways. I feel like that would make my life so much easier. Don't have to worry about traffic on I-10 or 95 by McDuff. So yeah.
And all the things. Okay. It sounds like practical magic. It's very, very practical. Let's see. So, in chapter 0, audio summary, I think 0, you described being, this is lovely handwriting. We'll circle back. Yeah. It's referencing a lot of adjectives. And
in chapter 0, the audio summary, you described a very vivid writings or markings on the arm. You used a lot of adjectives, which helped me see the picture you were describing to the detail. Why didn't you just call it a tattoo? Why do you call, and what do you call that genre? And there are several other points where you did that. So I like using a lot of adjectives because I'm extra. I like using a lot of adjectives because I'm really extra. I always describe things in a roundabout way, and that might be because I taught for DCPS for a very long time, so I have a very roundabout way of describing things. So I really do like adding as much detail as possible, because I am a visual learner, but I also like to try and rely on as many senses as possible, because I know for a lot of people, when they read a book, it plays out in their brain like a movie. That's me. And then other people, I've learned this year, they read a book and they can't even picture the story. But for me, my stories play out like a movie in my brain. And so I try to put down as many details as possible, whether it's to describe a tattoo or a scene, or how sticky the floor is, or how dim the light is, or how ice clinks in a cup when someone is taking a drink. Like, I try to just add enough details to put the reader in the world as I was in the world when I wrote it. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, makes perfect sense. I have, please, 2 things. Right. So there's this question, and then I want you to end with your opening, how you open the book itself.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So this last one, because I think it's important. At what point in the writing or publishing process did you decide to write for teens?
So it really started, I was teaching for DCPS, and even though I had younger kids after the election, and I really thought about, there really weren't a lot of books of fantasy books about them. And I was thinking about the kids, and I wanted to write a story where they could read down the line to show that I understand how they feel. In that feeling that teens feel when they feel like the world is against them and everyone hates them. And I wanted to just write a book that showed like, I see you, I value you, I got you. This book is for you. If you are angry, this book is for you. It is okay to be angry. You are allowed to feel how you are allowed to feel. And so that's one of the reasons why I wrote about teens, because I feel like a lot of the times books that are written that are considered YA, they're written more for adults. And I wanted to write a book that was specifically for teens, because I do think that adults really don't give teens a lot of credit, and they baby them. And they're very capable, because if you're 18 years old and you're allowed to vote and you're allowed to play the lottery and you're allowed to go into the army or the military, then you can handle books and content that talk about real world issues.
Sure. So if you would please.
Yeah.
Because it struck me. And Gabriella. My hands are up. I'm done.
And so, chapter 0. My opening. Oh, you mean my dedication.
Yes, your dedication.
My dedication. Right. I would like to preface this by saying I am a June Gemini, so I'm very petty. So the dedication to my book is, I dedicate this book to all of my haters. I only got this far out of spite.
The poisons we drink, everyone.
A wonderful way to end it. We love it. Pettiness is a great